Namaste to all. I'm Ashutosh Sharma. I'm from Forrester Research, and it's my pleasure to be here with you folks today. And thanks IBM to invite us here today. I'm going to talk about some of the new technology trends as we see from our vantage point that are going to be relevant in India, and how you as technology leaders can make sense of those trends and pursue what we call as future fit technology strategy. So in next about 14-15 minutes, let's quickly go through that and see if you have any questions. Maybe we can take them after the session. The first thing I want to say here is that we are back. We are back in terms of the amount of tech spend growth that we used to see pre-pandemic. We obviously saw a dip in about 2020, 2021 was a sort of a backup year when we grew really fast. But if you look at across the different markets, be it India or other geographies that you see up there, we're going to be coming back to the levels at which we were growing the tech spend. And for India, we expect it to stabilize around at 10 to 11% per annum. So I want to start with this data because this puts things in perspective as our roles as technology leaders become very, very important, that how do we use this money wisely which is being given to us. And if you look at the pandemic, there are a few things we learned from the pandemic, and one of the things that we learned, the role of the CIO has become very, very important. It is kind of put the technology in the perspective, because as Sandeep was also mentioning, there are a lot of things the technology function did, which business was not, in a way expecting that it will happen. So there were miracles that were done across organizations in keeping the business running and keeping the operations humming. So the CIO role has become really, really important. And as a result, there was a lot of focus initially on the resiliency of the business, but now business leaders are coming around and asking technology leaders to help them grow the business as well. So there's a lot of acceleration of the tech investment. There are a lot of technology topics which are becoming boardroom conversations. But depending on who you are and how you run your IT strategy, that can make a lot of difference in how your organization performs. So we do this study, we call it Future Fit Assessment, which is kind of a maturity assessment for different organizations and how mature their IT practices are. We find that the organizations which are at the top, the best performing organizations who exhibit certain characteristics, which I'll talk about in a few minutes, they tend to grow significantly faster than their peers. So the goal for each of us here is all the budgets that's given to us, we need to make sure that we are acting, behaving, and performing like the future fit organizations. But this has to be done in the context of what's happening around us, right? We can't obviously separate ourselves from the context, separate ourselves from the external factors as well as some of the internal factors. And one of the big change that we are seeing right now is the uncertainty that we live in. There were supply chain disruptions that were there a few years ago. They haven't fully alleviated. But we see geopolitical tensions, we see recession looming in certain parts of the world. And thankfully, we in India, as Sandeep also mentioned, we are not that badly impacted, but there's a lot of slowing down of the global GDP that's happening in major economies, and that might impact us in some way or form. The third thing is, of course, around as you do all these initiatives, as you plan for your transformation or some of the things that make you future fit, you have to figure out how do you get the talent from. And often we hear from organizations that we are not able to get the right sort of skills and talents, and we to execute on those initiatives. And we see that some of that might persist for a foreseeable future. But having said that, what I want to say here is that we still have a nice window of opportunity ahead of us, both as a nation as well as enterprises, because if you look look at where India is right now compared to, say, China, which was around 20 years ago, they made use of that window of opportunity which existed in terms of what they could do, how they could grow the economy, and I think we are finding ourselves in that sweet spot. So this is going to last for some time, and I think organizations must sort of seize this moment and do amazing things with both their business as well as the technology in enabling that. And again, as CIOs, you also have to worry about some of the internal factors, which kind of will always be there. They were always in the past, but as your role become more prominent, so would be the expectations from your internal stakeholders. Your business leaders, for example, would expect you to become much more effective, which is essentially around how can you help them deliver on the business outcomes, more than the cost, which of course is one of the things that the CFOs might talk to you about, but it's becoming somewhat of a less important. The other thing that we have found happen in that last 2 or 3 years with the urgency that we had around solving for the challenges that were thrown to the IT organization, to the business, we ended up investing in technologies in somewhat of a rush manner, if you will, right? And that has created a lot of technology debt. So we have to modernize and simplify and uncomplicate the structure, complicate the things that we have put in our businesses, and that would be one of the other major challenges. So how do you do all of this in a manner that makes you successful? And that's where what we call as future fit technology strategy comes into picture. And this is based on the research of a number of firms we kind of interviewed and surveyed over a couple of years across the globe, including in India. And we found that essentially there are few characteristics that the firms which are getting outsized return compared to their peers exhibit, and we need to kind of learn from those characteristics. And the three things that they do really well is basically becoming adaptive, creative, and resilient. What do I mean by that, right? So the role of the technology providers is to kind of build in a technology architecture which is somewhat much more composable, somewhat scalable, reusable, which kind of allows you to integrate or compose it in a manner with which you can solve whatever problems that your business might be facing. And not just the problems, even the opportunities that might come your way, you should be able to help your business seize that. And again, technology architecture is one thing. How do you use the nice things such as Kubernetes or cloud and various other things in which you can make your infrastructure much more, or your application much more sort of nimble and open and scalable. But at the same time, even from the culture perspective, how do you make your organization learn the practices of failing fast, which I know we have been talking about for some time? How do you make sure that you work with emerging technologies on a regular, sustainable basis so that you can bring them inside your organization to drive innovation and make use of them to kind of win any opportunity that might be there? The second is around creative. Creative is essentially around how to use data and insights to drive differentiation. I mean, if you look around, if you look in your phone, almost all the businesses, whether it's banking or airline or whatever, they kind of look very similar through their apps, right? But the key winning businesses are leveraging the data and insights that exist within their organization, as well as the other capabilities that they have built, the innovation mindset that they have built in the organization to drive much more differentiating value proposition for their customer. And third is resilient, which I'm sure all of you understand fairly well by now, given the couple of years of pandemic that we have gone through, as to how you have to build in solutions which allow you to run your business irrespective of the kind of crisis that your organizations face, be it some sort of lockdowns, or be it some other crisis, or floods and whatnot. Ultimately, the business has to be able to deliver on the brand promise that it's making to its customers. And these three things are underpinned by what we call as three key core drivers, and they are platforms, practices, and partners. Platforms basically are, again, two types. You can be building a platform business model, but what we are talking about are the platforms that go into making things happen. If you are trying to have a product-centric approach, or if you're using platforms, they ultimately help you accelerate your time to value. So you have to make use of them. You have to have the right practices, because if you're moving away from those old monolithic like big platforms in the future of the past to much more open, scalable things in the future, then you need to have the right practices to make that happen. And of course, the role of partners in making that happen is cannot be more pronounced than before, because partners bring all sort of these innovation capabilities. You can't do everything on your own. You need partners, and partners work with other partners to kind of orchestrate the value that exists in different partners, be it your SIs working with your cloud providers, with some of the security solutions, and bringing it all together for your solutions. So partners' role becomes very important as well. So we looked at some of the priorities that the organizations in India have around. I'm hoping it's visible in the back. And we classified, like I said, organizations across 3 tiers. Future fit firms were the most advanced firms, and around 3% of the firms were kind of in that category. Almost 38% in what we call as modern, which are somewhat kind of the second stage of maturity. And third is what we call as the traditional firms, which are not as modern. So we found that the future firms are focusing on growing the revenue, improving the experience of both employees as well as customers, and their ability to innovate. That's basically the key focus areas. But they're focusing less on reducing cost and the regulations and requirements. Not that they find that these things are not important, they find that they might have already made a lot of investments in making that happen. Now, if you compare that with the traditional firms, you'll find some changes. For example, reducing cost is the single biggest priority that the traditional firms have. So there's a still bit of that mindset which they need to get out of. Of course, reducing cost is important for the future fit firms as well, or the more modern firms as well, but that should not be the singular focus of your organization. And I'm hoping if you can get past those challenges, then those firms should be focusing on how they can deliver better solutions, more innovative solutions to their customers. Now, how do these priorities transition to the tech priorities? There's a sort of continuity you will observe. So we talked about business priorities, but they are focusing across, and this is kind of mix of all firms within India. There's a lot of focus on tech-enabled experimentation. That's like the single biggest thing that the technology organizations want to do. And you would find the improving IT's environmental sustainability as the second choice. Those of you who were sharp enough to notice, on the previous slide, that was actually at the bottom. So that was kind of surprised me. Because from the business priorities perspective, sustainability was not that high, but from IT perspective, it's actually one of the top two focus areas, which again means that as an IT organization, you might have some role to play. You might be asked to invest in sustainability initiatives, whether you're green data centers, green energies, and what are the different ways you can kind of contribute to that mission. It might have become somewhat of a low priority, or rather people might have taken a foot off the accelerator in some time, but it's a big priority across the globe, and very soon it's going to be in India. We expect this to be a $1 trillion opportunity across the globe, so you could expect the sustainability to come back in focus. But other things that they focus on, again, to enable the business priorities around employee experience, customer experience, security, data, and analytics. But lo and behold, cutting IT costs, thankfully, is not the biggest priority, which is probably a great thing. So as you will have a little bit of more freedom to deliver on the promises that you're asked to deliver on. How do they translate into the technology action? So some of that you saw on the previous slide came from the business and technology leaders. These are primarily coming from the technology leaders as to what they're going to be doing. And if you observe them, they kind of align to what I talked about: adaptive, creative, and resilient, right? Implement reusable architectures, use open, scalable, and adaptive platforms, improve data and analytics tech usage, and of course using multi-cloud, hybrid cloud, and zero trust for information security. So all of these parameters, whether you look at modern and future fit or firms or traditional firm, they are still a significant priority for both types of firms. Then let's have a quick look at the technologies. You will find that they again align to the technology actions that I talked about in the previous slide: artificial intelligence, Internet of Things, data marketplaces, and all. So there's a theme you see there, right? There's a lot of data and automation-related tech that the organization is going to be focusing on next 12 months, because we are seeing it across all the organizations. The data has become very, very important, be it manufacturing, be it financial services, which, by the way, was already aware of it, was already investing in, rather. But across the other sectors as well, we see a significant focus on investing in data and analytics, and ultimately driving the artificial intelligence type of use cases out of it. We are also seeing some of the data marketplaces and data product type of opportunities being taken care of by some of the organizations. Not as much metaverse, right? That's sort of the last priority. By the way, I kind of cut down some of the list, but truly metaverse was the last. There were a lot of other things which were ahead of it, like AR, VR, and many other things between low code and metaverse. But metaverse is not the key focus area. It might be a good new shiny toy. So that kind of gives me a lot of confidence, right? The technology leaders in India are kind of focusing on the right things rather than the things which probably may not yield immediate value in the near term or even in the mid term. So with having said that, what you saw was the data coming from the surveys. This is something that we have predicted that's likely to happen. I'm going to leave this slide for you guys so you can see, but there's a lot of action. Again, you'll see around modernization of the organization. You'll see around how organizations are changing the way they are developing applications, how they are focusing on building the data products, or investing in BI fabric, or for some of the other cloud native first strategies. So there's a lot of modernizing of the tech as well as focusing on AI and data analytics type of work that's going to happen. So having said that, I'm going to leave you with this one final message. So I've recently sort of taken up learning Gita, so this shlok came to me, and in which Arjun was asking Bhagwan Krishna that, you're asking me to, you're telling me that knowledge is the supreme thing. At the same time, you're asking me to, fight this war. If knowledge is most important, why should I even fight this war, right? So the Bhagwan Krishna responded that lokesmini 𝗲𝗲𝗃 nishtha pura prokta mayanag jnana yogin sankhanam karma yogin yoginam. Essentially, it means that there are two ways you can achieve enlightenment in this world. One is if you are of that inclination, by seeking the knowledge and sharing the knowledge. Second, if you are the person of action, then basically acting on it, right? So I'm the person of knowledge sharing this information. You guys are the men of action and the women of action. So go ahead and act, and hopefully you can make use of the opportunities that's ahead of us in the next few years. Thank you.